to waffle about. Let me tell you, through the fire and flames, bringing waffle to your face. I almost went into a rap here. Ryan was rapping earlier, but I'm not so musically inclined with my voice.
I don't
But
know.
exciting things.
Don't sell yourself short there, pal.
I'll sell myself very short because I'm not the tallest person. We're getting Ridley today. I'm creative. I was creating a map earlier, which is not easy at all. Let me tell you.
Nah,
those
maps
people
are
that have
easy.
those. Okay, fine. I'll sell myself short again. Ryan just assisted me here. But I've been creating a map because I'm trying to make my own fantasy world on
Cool,
the plane of existence that most people tend to exist. And on my own plane of existence, man, I have been doing some things. I actually went out yesterday.
Very
kinda.
specific. Been doing some things.
Things as in I went into a bookstore to try to get the new Adventure Zone. What's it called? Graphic novel, the Pedals to the Metal one. Shout out to that. Ended up buying. It did, and I also ended up buying more because things were there. There was the volume of Naruto, the first 3 volumes of it. So I just bought that. There was the first chapter of Mob Psycho, the first chapter of My Hero Academia. There was the entire, how many volumes? I don't know, I think it's 1 through 6 of Berserk. The deluxe edition of it. It's like leather bound or fakely leather bound. I got that thing. That stuff's good inspiration. It's massive. And I also got the Vinland Saga Book 1.
Nice.
And was not expecting to do that. It was quite the sum of money to just drop after getting a nice chonky meal.
I mean, this will finally teach you how to read, so that's probably a good step.
I don't know about that, man. It's in English. I only know how to read Japanese. I'm just kidding. Even that's impossible.
Yeah, that's
a
stretch.
Not only have I been, getting these books as well. I haven't read them yet. They're just sitting out like decorations. But I've also been even more absorbed into something I've probably mentioned before, which is these things called VTubers. Oh God, he said it.
How dare
Don't
you?
stare into the abyss. It will stare back. It will pull you.
I'm gonna be honest, man. It's lost on me. I don't understand it, but I'm glad you're enjoying it.
I mean, I don't think there's anything to understand or not understand.
Right, but it's just not my cup of tea, I guess.
There you go. That's how you should word that. Understanding stuff is or saying you don't understand it typically offends me a little bit,
That's why.
I can't understand the thing that you're doing. Doesn't make any sense to me. I'm like, wow.
Well, that's when you're like, hey, explain this to me. Let me understand.
Well, it's just anime girl streamers. Bam. If you like anime, cute girls doing cute things, or cute girls doing shitposty, memey things, whatever your cup of tea is, you check those out. But they are beyond comprehension often. And you know what? Maybe that's an entire antithesis to what I just said about not understanding things. And the topic for today that we're doing, before then, of course, just to introduce ourselves, so you know who the hell's talking. He's Ryan.
He's Braxton.
That is me. This is the Dungeon Crawl. Today we'll be talking about the Feywild and why I'm
a little hurt, man.
You're hurt?
He didn't even ask me how my week's been. He doesn't care apparently about his buddy over here. Just that he went and he's been doing his stuff.
Yeah.
This is the Braxton cast apparently.
All right, well, now I got them all prepped. They're like on the edge of their seat. The Feywild's coming up, and now they got to hear about Ryan's day.
Well, I'm glad you asked, Braxton, because my day has been tiring. I've been working. I had some long-ass days of work yesterday and today, dealing with a patient that is experiencing some extreme psychoses. And we're also recording this once again the night before the podcast is released. So we're probably going to be a little loopy, a little out of it. But I mean, I think that's pretty perfect for talking about the Feywild anyway. So
I'm doing pretty okay right now. I am a little worried about you, though. Memes aside, ignoring your day aside, I hope you're okay.
I'm good, man. I'm all right. I'm now chilling, sitting, thinking about the Feywild. And
that might make you go crazy. I wouldn't do that.
Well, maybe. I mean, it's enchanting. That's for damn sure.
Well, I've heard some crazy stuff about it. And I think where I wanted to start in terms of like refreshing my information on this and learning about it in regards to your research here is we did an episode on the plains once upon a time, which was a fun episode. We did do it. and we talked about the general structure, or at least the understood universe.
Right, the cosmology.
And planes, cosmology.
Not cosmetology. Very different.
Not important distinction there. And when you zoomed out and zoomed in towards like the material plane, it had like two sides to it, two kind of shadows, I guess. One being the Shadowfell, literally, and then the Feywild. They're kind of like different reflections of
mirrors.
The material plane. Yeah. So when we talked about our Shadowfell episode, it made me think, like, whenever we talk about the Feywild and we start getting into it, that the Shadowfell is the dark, is the bad side, and the Feywild is the good and orderly side. And that's not even the case.
No, not at all.
Not at all. It surprised me.
Both are pretty bad.
Yeah,
well, it can be.
That's the misconception I mentioned earlier.
It's more so emotion-wise, there are two polar opposite ends. One is devoid of all emotion besides melancholy and sadness, and the other one is chock full of every emotion.
All right. That's a big difference. It even has the melancholy and sadness, or is that gone?
Yeah. It basically takes all emotions there are multiplied by 10.
Well, that's crazy.
Yeah.
It does not sound like a good time. Sounds like high school.
Going through some hormonal episodes.
I mean, is there a difference?
I mean, yeah, because when you get upset because Craig didn't invite you to the party in high school, it doesn't make the world start raining around you, literally. In the Feywild,
it might feel like that.
In the Feywild, if you're pretty sad, it will change the weather.
What?
Yeah.
Is there a scientific explanation for this, or is it just how it is?
Because emotions rule in the Feywild.
Okay, I'm going to need a little bit more information on that because it doesn't make sense to my peewee-sized brain here.
Okay, well, I guess we'll start there with the Feywild. But emotions change inside here rapidly. And as a DM, I think it's very important to portray this because it's similar to the Shadowfell. It's very tough to express to the players to roleplay this as a very melancholy. Your emotions are getting lost and you feel nothing really, especially because that might hit a little too close to home for those of us with depression. The Feywild is the opposite, where the emotions rule everything, and the longer you stay within the Feywild, the more leaving seems less appealing, and you don't want to go. You're so happy. It's like if anyone's read the Percy Jackson books, there's that section where they're in the it's like a carnival, not a carnival, a casino. Yeah, they're in a casino, more or less, and they get lost in it so much they forget, they don't want to leave. They want to stay here. Feywild's very similar to that type of emotion.
Me and VTubers right now, and One Piece.
Pretty much.
There's a bunch of parallels to draw here.
But it's a tough thing to portray to players, that this is how you're supposed to play your character.
Yeah. So I guess the beginning of what we can talk about with the Feywild is like how you would even go about getting here, or why,
or even further back, Braxton. What is it?
Further, what is it? It's a place in the world.
Plane, yeah. It's often referred to. No, please, no, please. Well, say your sentence first, because my sentence is just going to be information.
My sentence is also information, probably less valuable, and it's already left my brain. So please.
Okay. Okay. So it's also commonly referred to as the plane of fairy. It's the kind of shows you what is in there. Fairies. It's a very vibrant, beautiful, stunning, gorgeous, enchanting place. There are dancing lights, enchanting music, some mischief, and quite often, as all the others, some grim and dark tales.
Oh. There's a common portrayal that you grow up seeing, that these sorts of magic and nature bound places are really like fun, lighthearted, and good. But the more I've gotten into like traditional fairy tales and storytelling, these things mess with mortals so much.
Yeah, they're pretty dark.
Yeah, like I was watching ReZero recently, and I'll keep spoilers out of it, but one character complimented another saying they looked like a fairy, and the character that was being complimented took it as an insult. Mm-hmm. Now there's a culture barrier here because the main character's from a different world, and he's like, well, fairies are like dainty, pretty things, and she's like, they're crazy, psychotic, and they will destroy you and hurt you. It's like, oh, I guess that's kind of the more common portrayal, and maybe is that more in line with what the Feywild is like in D&D?
I mean, yes and no. There are typical fairy tale-ish type stuff going on, but a lot of them, I think, if you want to pull from something, can definitely be the Brothers Grimm fairy tales, the kind of the darker spin on stuff. And I think the Feywild will always have this kind of darker feeling to it. Obviously, it depends on how you, as the DM, portray this to the players. And today we'll be speaking a little bit more generally. Similar to the Shadowfell, there are some quote-unquote official locations and lore and stuff that goes into it, but just for the sake of, because while I think that stuff is important and very easy to draw from if that's what you like, I'm always in the camp of kind of making up your own stuff as you go. And so we're going to be talking more generally speaking about the, what inhabits here, the feelings you may get, and of course, if you want these specific locations and adventures, then definitely dive more into the official material. So
I'm jumping around here, but is this typically a place that any party could jump into, or would it take a lot of preparation and a couple of levels?
No, I mean, it's definitely, I think, would be easier to manage than the Shadowfell. Granted, again, it depends on how the DM shows it and how the DM creates this darker feel and the creatures that inhabit it. But there's definitely some nasty beings as well as some Fae that are less intense. I think a lot of the combat here will be more so on the side of hags and, stuff along those lines, giants and blights. And I think the majority of your time in the Feywild will be roleplay-y.
So that's an interesting point too, and you're making me realize that most monsters that I read descriptions of, whenever I'm trying to put them into games that I'm making or locations, they do say, oh, this creature hails from the Shadowfell, or this comes or is of the Feywild, and it makes me realize now how prevalent those places are in the happenings of the material plane specifically. And I completely forgot that specifically hags are from the Feywild, and those things are nasty.
They are.
So what I'm really enjoying about learning of the Feywild and makes me excited to use it in my own games is that like Brothers Grimm sort of creepy, interesting-esque theme that you can get tossed in there. And we talked about in the Shadowfell episode, like denizens, locations, which you just brought up as well. And I already kind of knew a bit what was in the Shadowfell, so all of this here is going to be super, super new information for me.
Cool, man.
So I guess we've already laid the groundwork, talked about what the Feywild is.
Yeah, I just want to also, because we mentioned that it's a mirror, but similar to the Shadowfell, how we mentioned that previously, that instead of a dark twist, everything turns into this kind of bright spectacle. Like if in the material plane, an old ruin of sorts could instead be an elaborate castle for an archfey, and a decaying forest would, on the Feywild, would be extremely lush and extravagant land filled with greenery and flowers. There's also
so in accordance.
I was just gonna say, there's also this never fading sunset that portrays in this land. It just day is forever.
Well, that makes sense since the Shadowfell is dark and gloomy all the time.
Right.
So in traditional portrayals of this, like on DM's Guild or in any official Wizards of the Coast material, the Feywild and the Shadowfell, and you can direct it specifically to the Feywild, but this mirror image concept, is that strict, as in a location in the material plane exists in a similar form, reflected and slightly altered in the Feywild, or can't there be completely new locations?
There should be. There should always be a mirror image. Of course, similar to the Shadowfell, distance can be a little bit different, so you can be a little light on it. So you're not like, making a one-to-one recreation of your world in the Shadowfell and Feywild. You can kind of play with that idea. But a big city in the material plane will have a reverse image in both of these planes, similar to this. So just basically, I would take landmarks and find out what would be the flip opposite, the flip dark opposite, and then the extravagant opposite.
Honestly, that might kind of make it pretty attractive to do an adventure there if you're adept at making your own material. A lot of the groundwork, I guess, is already done if you've got your world set up.
It basically multiplies your world by 3.
So that's really cool. That it seemed a lot more daunting at first, and it's the same concept for the Shadowfell then, I suppose. But that actually gets me really excited because a world that I'm creating now is already kind of chaotic, but putting this spin on it might make it even more interesting. Mm-hmm. So in terms of getting there, I guess before we start talking about like who is actually living and resides there, is it the same thing as the Shadowfell, or are there different ways to enter? Because I know the Shadowfell had random portals that we had a specific name for that would get like Shadow Crossing, I believe was the wording for it. What's the analog here for the Feywild?
Well, it might blow your mind, Braxton, but there is a thing called a Fey Crossing.
God, I knew that was going to be what it was.
Yeah, there are these Fey crossings, and that typically will be the way people access the Feywild. And it's less obvious than it is in the Shadowfell, while that is like, I'm walking into a dark crypt. Oh, I'm suddenly in this dark place. Okay, I guess that makes a little sense. The Feywild is a little more accidental. You can very easily get there without ever trying to. Just seriously, you take a dip in a lake. You just trying to cool off, and then you put your head down and come back up, and boom, there you're on the Feywild.
I guess that reminds me, we had a part in our campaign a while ago when we got one of our new players. I think this is when that happened. It might not have been. But we were in a forest and things started getting a little weird. Different monsters showed up. We were getting lost more easily. Mm-hmm. And you don't have to tell me now because of spoilers, but I'm pretty sure we've heard that there might be a Fey crossing around there.
Yeah, so there's some elf stuff going on, and elves play a big role in the Feywild, without a doubt.
Yeah, and a good example, I think, that maybe doesn't do it one-to-one how D&D does, but there was a game kind of controversial that just got remastered, in the lightest terms of the word remastered, Kingdoms of Amalur Reckoning. And that game, before it was even a game, had a massive world written by a pretty accoladed writer. I don't remember his name exactly, but he had a pretty massive world. And it does center around the Seelie Fae and the Unseelie Fae. And that's, I think, would be kind of similar to this, or at least how the elves operate. Maybe we'll learn that it's kind of similar. But if you're looking for a feel of that in terms of a video game experience, that would be something.
Yeah, it was written by the guy who writes a lot of D&D books.
Oh, really?
R.A. Salvatore.
Oh, well, shit. Makes sense.
Yeah, he's the guy that wrote the Drizzt series.
Huh. Small world then, I guess.
I mean, it's definitely a very D&D-ish type world.
Oh, yeah. I'd be careful on getting the remaster right now. It's not full price, but it's...
The Re-Reckoning.
Oh, man. It's a very light...
Return to Amalur.
The remaster. It's like they turned the lights on a little bit better, but it didn't age well. Anyways, I mean, getting back to the Feywilds, these Fey crossing, so you can just kind of come across them in happenstance. I guess like maybe in more nature-like areas, would they be more similar?
They are very infrequent. They're not at every place. They only exist on lands that are near identical on both sides of the plane. Hence why taking a dip in a lake would mean you would come out on a lake that's exactly the same on the other side. Of course, the surroundings might not be the same, but that lake looks exactly the same.
Ooh, what if one of your players decided to take a dive in a lake that they found? It was just super pretty, and they took a dive, and instead of like going down and having to come back up, they just keep diving, and they like jump out of the water on the other side.
That's cool. Now you're thinking with portals.
Now you're thinking with portals. That's such a good game. I can't play anymore. And they've the hell out of it.
These crossings can definitely vary on their faithfulness. So that party member that just dive down there, if a friend tries to follow them, it might not still be open 30 minutes from now.
No.
Sometimes they're only open with a particular item that you have on your person. And they can and will close permanently if the land on either side is changed drastically. So if there's a crossing that's forced and then it gets bulldozed, that crossing will no longer exist.
That's interesting, and it kind of would make sense as to why there are able to be newer or kind of different areas in the Feywild. Like one of the cities or worlds you might be telling us about in the future. Because there wouldn't be a shadow or a Fey crossing there, as it's two entirely different from what exists on either side. So you would need to get to a Fey crossing and then travel to that point if you wanted to get there. So that's interesting as well.
I always think there's a cool way you could experiment with this, because the denizens of the Shadowfell are definitely a lot more violent by nature. The Fey, on the other hand, are more tricksy. So a cool idea would be a permanent crossing somewhere that people know about, that the Fey know about, the locals know about, and maybe the two trees come together to form some sort of gateway. And then you kind of think about how this constant opening will have an effect on both sides of the portal. You'd have, the old man Jenkins is always complaining about, these damn fairies that keep coming and tying his shoes together. It's it's some cool stuff. They'll really bring the fairy tale aspect of it to life.
Yeah, there could be a lot of quests that could lean towards the Feywild existing there if your players are fairly knowledgeable or in their world currently, like they've been around a bit, they've heard of the Feywild, and you start getting to these places where you're bringing some callbacks to some maybe grim fairy tales, stuff like that. So that could theme your quests that are in the area.
To throw a wrench in that idea,
okay.
The next part of the Feywild to know about before we get even more into the nitty-gritty details, because this is the most commonly known thing I would say about the Feywild, besides there are fairies in there, is the time warp aspect.
Oh, yeah. I've heard about that one, and it deeply scares me.
Yeah, so there's a similar aspect. There's two very big problems with going to the Feywild, one being memory loss. Upon leaving the Feywild, it's very possible that unless you are of Fey nature, so unless you're an elf, then you will possibly forget everything that occurred to you while you're within the Feywild. It's a very easy DC 10 wisdom save, but if you fail that, boom, it's all gone. It can be remedied by spells that deal with curses. And of course, you could talk to a Fey and maybe get things worked out. But keep that in mind. Don't forget it. And then the next step would be the time warp. While the memory loss thing can be managed with you'd say everyone but one person saves, and so then the cleric just casts a remove curse spell on that guy, then boom, okay, they remember everything that happened. The time warp has no cure. Once you leave the Feywild, it can be a little, different on the other side. If you spend a day within the Feywild, time can change. Lords and ladies have now been succeeded, kingdoms have fallen, and people you cared about have died. There is a table, if you're a DM, to look at in the DM's guide. The Feywild time warp, a D20 roll. Some say days become minutes, so it actually became less time. Days became hours. Okay, that's still all right. No change. Great. Days become weeks. Now we're getting into some rough territory. Days become months. And finally, days become years.
Okay, so time can get shorter, too.
Yes, it can.
Well, interesting. Yeah. Well, you did mention days become hours, right?
Yes, yeah.
That would be pretty funny. So that was the thing I was going to ask, if it was a consistent one-to-one thing, but that table is a pretty cool resource. And I have to wonder if there's source material or anybody on DM's Guild that might have made something that adds effects to this, because I know that any DM who brings their players into this place is for sure going to see that time thing and be like, "Oh, this is some juicy plot," and it's going to happen.
There are a lot of different tables for this. I've seen some that are based around the feeling that the characters have as they leave the Feywild. So if you have a dreadful feeling, then it was hours. If you have a very happy, blissful feeling, then it's months or years. Kind of going along with the emotion aspect.
Yeah, and there was a similar thing, maybe not with leaving, but how your emotions were in the Shadowfell. Weren't you getting attacked by certain things?
Yes. Yeah.
These are such cool concepts too, and I like that they aren't just paralleled with the Feywild and the Shadowfell. They're pretty unique to each other.
Yeah.
The Shadowfell doesn't really have a leaving upon leaving effect, if I recall.
No. Well, not specifically like that. No.
Okay. All right. So I
do want to make sure it is important. You can prevent that or remove it with a wish spell. So, something easy that everyone has.
Well, that helps out. And everybody has the wish spell on hand.
And the other way you can prevent this, and this will lead us to our next step, is a bargain or a quest that a Fey offers. Fey have a tendency, the fairies that exist here love bargains. They're like patrons.
They remind me of devils.
Yeah, they're patrons. Okay, yeah, that's a good way to look at it too. They're very similar to devils, though they don't write contracts. They're more like spoken contracts.
Which is worse, kind of?
It's much easier to kind of walk you into a trap.
Oh, yeah.
But it's a way for them to trick and mess with people. Once you lock a Fey into their word, they will follow that to a T. But getting them to get to something that works for you and not for them, good luck.
That's interesting, too. It reminds me again of Kingdoms of Amalur, is the Seelie Fae, I think specifically in that. They all operate off of ballads, and they're like binding stories that they can never deviate from, and it's cyclical. When a ballad is written, those people involved directly in it will continuously repeat that story over and over for their eternity of life, and they accept this. So it's not like literally them making contracts, but it's that similar theme of them kind of sticking to a word that's been created or spoken about or passed on. So that's really, really interesting to me. I think it would be super, super fun to play with, as well as like a main villain of an arc too, or at least a quest line that you've got. So that gives me a lot of inspiration.
Yeah.
All right. What's next?
Well, just utilize the bargains, show a Fae getting upset by some very slight insurrection. You stepped on a flower by accident. That happened to be the Fae's favorite flower. How dare you destroy it? So the Fae's like, all right, well, I'll stop. This Fae pesters them for the next 5 days or so. Just doesn't leave them alone. So the Fae's like, all right, I will stop. I will leave you alone if you do this for me. And this is a great way to introduce side quests into the main campaign, or hell, even make it a part of the main campaign, because this guy will introduce them to a lot of the main characters that you as a DM want people to know within the Feywild.
So you keep saying this Fey, that Fey, but what kind of denizens are here? Can that be anything, or is it like an elf specifically?
Specifically, it's called sylvan creatures, which kind of break down to elves, dryads, satyrs, pixies, sprites. Even adds on as other creatures that can be here: centaurs, blink dogs, fairy dragons, unicorns, and then you get into the nastiness of the hags, blights, and giants.
Yeah. Unicorns in D&D, I haven't interacted with them, but they are some of the craziest creatures, aren't they? Things they can do.
What, like badass?
I mean, like, they're not just a horse with a horn, right?
I mean, they pretty much are, as far as I'm aware.
I feel like I saw some sort of source material.
They can heal and do some... You talking about, like, just them as... okay. They are a pretty low rated thing. They're a CR5, but I mean, they do have some extra fun abilities. They can heal you. They can teleport you. It has to be nearby, but I guess they can do a little bit extra more for you.
That's really interesting. So is there any sort of repercussion for bringing something out of the Feywild, or are they able to just leave and go?
Depends on what are you taking, man?
I guess that unicorn. Maybe you want a unicorn steed in the material plane.
Why would that unicorn willingly come with you? It's got its own wills and thoughts and ideas.
Okay, yeah. Maybe I was just a really cool guy, and the unicorn's like, we're gonna.
The unicorn's gonna tell you to fuck off, dude.
Oh shit. Honestly, I'm pretty terrified of the Feywild. I'm not gonna lie.
I mean, that unicorn can't speak, and you should very much be terrified of the Feywild. They have
evidence supports that.
And when and if we cover the hells, maybe we should do an episode just on each specific layer. I don't know.
Probably.
But similar to the hells, they do have this kind of sense of honor, this hierarchy. It's less so in the fact that, I'm stronger than you, so you are underneath me, kind of like the abyssal stuff. But they have courts. There's a court system, and I don't mean court as in like you're going to jail. I mean court as in like a group of people, right?
Well, in Kingdoms of Amalur, it's exactly like the Seelie Fae and the Unseelie Fae are courts, like a grouping of people with a certain theme or ideology. And
this makes even more sense that was written by R.A. Salvatore, because the courts in the Feywild are called the Summer Court, and there are very many different interpretations of these courts. So I definitely say look these up. This is just the one that I'm gonna go with for right now. The Summer Court is led by Queen Titiana, and she leads the Seelie Fae.
Okay.
The Seelie Fae, those are the ones that are more known as the quote the good Fae. Granted, even still, they will,
with a big asterisk,
yes,
probably.
Big asterisk. They just mess with you. They play tricks on you, but they're not going to straight up just kill you. That's not fun for them. They like the Joker playing with Batman. Once they finally kill Batman, what are they going to do? They want to mess with you for as long as possible.
Okay, and that reminds me as well too. A bunch of references and allusions this time around. There's Ancient Magus Bride or Magus Bride. I don't remember what it is, but she specifically, and is Oberon also the part of the Summer Court?
That I don't know. Like I said, there's a lot of interpretations of it.
Yeah, but at least in that show, it's very much in line with what you're telling me here. They're very unpredictable, and they have their own machinations and what they like to do. It's not very clear cut at all. So it's pretty consistent in terms of how people are writing it, rather than it just being what I thought fairy tale is fun. It's very representative of the experience you have going from hearing about these fairy tales as a kid, these Disney movies. Oh, lots of happy endings. Well, the stories that those are based off of are kind of dark and grim a bit.
I mean, there is some organization, like location wise. Like I said, we're not really going to go over that too much, but the locations are split up not by, north, south, and west, but they're split up by seasons. So the seasons are not spaced out by time, but by place. So if you go to get to winter, you'd have to go through autumn first. You'd have to pass through summer, and then if you start up spring, you got to work your way down, right? It's thinking about it conceptually, it kind of hurts the brain, because how am I going to walk through autumn? But for a Fae, be like, hey, yeah, just head this way, and eventually you'll hit spring, and then you're gonna get down to summer, then you'll hit autumn. There it is.
Well, yeah, the way my human brain would justify is just places with different climates, right? That's how
more or less
we might experience it.
So you better hope if you plane shift here, you're plane shift into the areas that you want to go, because you're gonna have a lot of walking to do otherwise.
Right between fall and winter.
It's a good spot, man.
It's a good spot.
Not too
cold.
We're
about to approach that.
Not too hot.
Perfect. So that's really cool, though. I had no idea about that. I did know of the courts. In Divinity Original Sin, they've got that in spades as well if you play as an elf. There's even a couple of quests that represent that.
The other court being the Gloaming Court. The Queen of Air and Darkness rules over here, and she leads the Unseelie Fae, as Braxton kind of used those words earlier.
Yep.
These are the kind of the more than kind of, again, asterisks, evil Fae. They're less on the bargaining and trick side, and more on the side of trapping you and then killing you.
Well, that's not very fun.
No, it's not. But neither is getting played with in bargain.
Do they prefer that, though?
Because it's more fun for them. They're not just going to kill you, but they are going to hunt you first. It's like the most dangerous game.
To each their own. So are hags things that are here, or hags their own thing?
They are. Oh, like you can, like as an Unseelie Fae?
Yeah.
Not necessarily, no. They like doing their own crap. They don't like having any,
So not everything has to be sanctioned to a specific part. There are just non-partisans around.
Yes, definitely.
That's really cool then. And for the Shadowfell, we talked about what was like one of the biggest bads is that guy that had the maze. Was one of my favorite ones that we talked about.
Well, Orcus hangs out there. There's a lot of bad things in the Shadowfell.
Eesh. And what's the parallel here? What kind of big bads do we have? Is it those people that lead the courts, essentially?
Yeah, if you want to go with that route, the other option that you could bring into it would be the Archfey. They're going to be the stronger Fey that exist here, the ones that have kind of moved up in the world, I guess. They're the ones that have the power to really make these really heavy bargains with you.
Interesting.
Yeah, they're less big bad dudes and more along the lines of, if you do something for me, I'll do something for you.
Yeah, that's what interests me more. Like, thematically, I might be more interested in the Shadowfell, but for the Feywild, it seems like there's so much more room for creativity, or at least things going really crazy, versus the Shadowfell, like you're getting hunted, killed, preyed upon. This, at least with the Unseelie Fey, yeah, maybe, but they're a little more tricky.
Yeah.
And it really does kind of parallel the demon versus princes within the Shadowfell and the Feywild is something I'm drawing here.
Yeah, the big, if I were to use these for quests, a lot of them would be going to meet one of these Archfey, trying to, obviously you don't want to fuck with these dudes. A lot of them can be pretty nasty. They're almost like semi-gods. They definitely view themselves as gods, because especially in the Feywild, they have that power and have that ability. But getting them to help you with something would be a fun little quest line to go through.
Oh, yeah. And imagine that scene, too, interacting with an Archfey, especially if you've got kind of a cheeky character. Things aren't going to fly or go your way if they're back talking or being sassy at all, I imagine.
I think a good way to kind of picture to wrap your head around the Feywild would be to read or watch an interpretation of Alice in Wonderland.
Ooh.
That very much is the idea of something so nonsensical that it makes sense. It has really cool. It has the Feywild aspect to it, where it's so silly and so out there, and that's exactly how the Feywild is.
Yeah, it's like in Alice in Wonderland, it very much starts out like a playhouse for her, and people are speaking in riddles. It's fun. And
even how she gets there, falling down a hole, that's how you'd get to the Feywild.
Just follow a silly little rabbit.
Yeah.
And it gets genuinely, that depiction or certain stories you read are pretty scary. Those situations. I would be having a hard time there. And if you've got a great DM who's portraying that, and definitely bring some music and background tones for this too. But I think it, like, from what I'm learning right now compared to the Shadowfell, like, I'm flopping. I used to love the Shadowfell more, starting to like the Feywild even more. But before we keep going forward, and I think moving on to maybe resources if you have those, I want you to give me like the shortest, like a little bot of going into the good old news, because there's not much. We didn't even have one last time.
Yeah.
This time, give me a little Seinfeld like bass slap. Going into the news. It's a little mellow. We're mellow today. It's the end of at least our Monday. Things were a little stressful, but we've mentioned this before. The only thing that's really coming out again is that Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. But more recently and sooner, used to have a September 15th release date. But if you're excited about Icewind Dale,
which is today.
Yeah, it is today. It was supposed to come out today, but Icewind Dale, Rime of the Frost Maiden, is coming out on September 29th. And our good friend Kenneth, who was here for the Shadowfell episode, actually has been telling me a good bit about it. And there's a lot more in terms of like classes and subclasses and things to spice up your play. If you're interested in this, for solely the experience, the story, that's awesome. But this does have some core content for you too, which got me really excited about it. Yeah, it's coming out on the 29th. The new release is currently on track for September 29th.
On Amazon, it's still scheduled for today.
Is it?
Yeah, I think the dice got delayed. I know that much.
Well, I'm looking on Dungeons and Dragons, so dnd.wizards.com, the official site. Yeah, and it still says the new release date is currently on track for the 29th. So
interesting.
Hopefully, I mean, if it comes out today, that'd be awesome. But keep an eye out that. It's whether or not it's a short amount of time. in the scope of the Feywild. You step in there for like one day, and then a week passes and it's out. So you're okay. But I was not as excited about this until I realized there was some more stuff to spice up the play, the classes, the characters that you've been working on, playing as for some time now. And also there's a massive horned owl that's really scary and creepy looking.
Yeah, it does look cool.
So I'm super, super down. Also, something I want to like jostle with you real quick.
Sure, man. Jostle it.
This is a spoiler for a creature that could be in Icewind Dale. Okay. So like plug your ears for a minute or two, or just speed back until I mention the Feywild. We have returned. I'll say that again, and you can look for that. So, spoiler here, Ryan, vampire gnoll. Is that redundant?
Is that what?
Redundant.
No, not necessarily. Gnolls aren't undead.
Yeah, I guess. Okay, so they're undead. They can't go outside in the sun, depending on how you're playing your vampire. Rather than meat, they just want blood.
Yeah.
It's still very similar, though. Do they still serve you Nogu?
I would think so.
Then what's the difference?
I mean...
Exactly.
No. Hold on. I mean, there's lots
It's such a lateral move.
No, I mean, the vampire and the gnoll don't have that much overlap.
I mean, I imagine this gnoll is still just going to want to ransack and kill things. They're just not going to eat the entire body this time around.
I mean, can you imagine? So let's say you're a big, badass vampire. You lived thousands of years, and you come up with this idea. You know, your human spawn have not been just cutting it lately. And then you see this band of gnolls go running by. A light bulb goes off in your head. How about I turn one of those guys into my vampire spawn?
But are they going to listen to him?
Why not?
The thrallship of the vampire overtake the desire to serve Yenogu that's been presiding over them immensely?
There's only one way to find out, man. Read Rime of the Frost Maiden.
And also listen to our podcast on the Gnolls. Okay, let's return to the Feywild. If you're looking for spoilers, now's the time you can come back. So did you find any source material that's like on DM's Guild or anything that is regarding to Feywild? Oh, hell yeah.
Damn straight. First, I'm going to start with an adventure. I bought it a long time ago. I never had a chance to run it, but I know if the Feywild ever really gets brought up into my games, this will probably be the first, start looking at for some more inspiration, is a Kobold Press book. It's Secrets of the Shadow Court, I believe is what it's called.
Okay, I've heard of that. Or maybe that's just from Dragon's Dogma. Yeah,
it's an old Courts of the Shadowfae. Sorry, that's what it's called. It's an older adventure, and it's now been kind of revised and redone by Wolfgang Bauer, and it's Bauer. But it's super cool. The art's fantastic. It takes the characters from 7th to 10th level, and it's a kind of cool way to start bringing in, instead of just the old Shadowfell, bringing in specific Shadowfell that you want, or not Shadowfell, Feywild that you want, the Shadowfae. Get some kind of dark, twisted, elf stuff going on. And it brings you a lot of the locations for the courts and the different courts areas and how it all works together. Kind of a good way to go ahead and start bleeding that type of crossover into your world right away. I think it's fantastic. I like all the Kobold Press stuff, cool. Honestly.
No, anytime you mention Kobold Press, I always get a little excited because it always sounds pretty damn cool. And yeah. I need some more inspiration lately too, because like I mentioned, making that map is just, it's rough. Like I'm even looking at just like real world stuff. So
yes,
any source material is just so useful. And again, not forgetting so many
history books.
Would this be a cool concept? Like taking something in the Feywild and understanding that it's usually a mirror or something in the material plane, working kind of backwards.
Sure.
So looking at the Feywild, creating a fantastical location here, and then making it more normal and putting it into your world, kind of working backwards.
Why not, man?
Pretty cool. I like that. All right. Now we're thinking with portals.
Yeah, we're thinking with Fae. Some of the other stuff that I looked at is obviously the good old DM's guide, but unfortunately, as we've talked about many a times, their material on the plains is unfortunately very, very lacking. And it's very sad. There's a little bit more in Mordenkainen's, but that's specifically talking about the Eladrin, which is a type of elf that lives in the Feywild, and even still, that's like a page. So, unfortunately, Wizards of the Coast gets a poo-poo rating for me on the Feywild, at least for 5th edition.
It's okay, they're coming out with that planar book soon, probably.
Their wonderful Manual of the Plains for 4th edition, on the other hand, covers the Feywild in extensive detail, has really cool ideas, talks about the different locations, talks about the different people who live there. I pimped that a little bit for the Shadowfell episode too, but I definitely recommend looking at the Manual of the Plains books they've had over the last few editions, which is why I'm thinking 5th edition is in dire need, please.
Yeah, that makes me wonder too. So when did 5th edition come out? It's been like 4 or 5 years, right?
I want to say now it's probably been out since like 2013, something like that.
So I guess like my question here, and maybe we can pry into why 5th edition doesn't have a lot of info on planar stuff. Like, how long has it been since 4th was released? And we don't have to figure this out. Just kind of tossing the ball with you right now. But they've had a decent amount of time to flesh it out. I guess they were just really focusing on the user experience, huh?
Yeah, if I had to guess, it's probably because they took some surveys, which they do a lot, and found out not many people go to other planes. It's probably not a very often covered subject. I love the planes because it's, again, like you said, it's especially these two, Shadowfell and Feywild, it's like expanding your world by 3 without even trying too much.
Yeah, and I mean, you spend a lot of time working on the material plane. It's just like, why do I really need to leave?
Right.
So, which is why that like relevation that Ryan just reminded us of, that it's really just a mirror reflection of what you've got. Just throw denizens of the Feywild in there.
And if your players are bored, any of the planes is a great way to spice things up, because there's not a single plane that has nothing going on.
Well, technically, there's not a plane that has nothing going on, but there is a plane of nothing.
I mean, but even still, there's stuff going on in there.
Yeah, there's some weird-ass things going on, and we should definitely cover that in depth more, because it's really interesting. But for the Feywild, I kind of want to talk about the things that players can be, and I guess the Eladrin is one of those. But
yeah.
What are those things? What can people be from the Feywild?
A gnome. Eladrin.
Gnome?
Yeah, gnome.
Huh.
Eladrin.
Okay.
I mean, some, again, shooting it back to Kobold Press, have a way for you to play as a centaur. I mean, that's about it. Okay. Obviously, and you can have things. I mean, there are subclasses that are highly intertwined with the Feywild. So you just be a regular old human boy or an elf boy that's, attached to this, or hell, anything, and just you've been Fey touched somehow.
Which could be a reason to go to the Feywild. I mean, find out.
To make Braxton happy, one of the other books that I'd looked at is from the DM's Guild. I highly recommend this as well, called Gimble's Guide to the Feywild. And they have options in there for players. One of them being the Warlock has another otherworldly patron for a hag.
What?
Yeah, a hag is your otherworldly patron, man.
That doesn't sound very fun.
Well, is it fun to be a patron to a great old one?
Yes.
All right, well, you're biased, man.
So I'm super biased. Not only am I like a simp for warlocks, but anytime there's source material that comes out, if it's not like from the far realms, something from under the sea, or anything Lovecraft, I'm not excited about it.
All right, well, the hack's pretty cool, man. I'm not gonna lie, it even comes with some new invocations.
There better be some invocations. Those things are spicy. Love them.
Okay. Yeah, so those are basically your options to be attached to it. Definitely look at I believe Mordenkainen's, or not Mordenkainen's, Xanathar's touched a little bit more on some planar subclasses too, so definitely give that a look.
All right. So at this point, I'm reminded of what you said before the podcast started, is that there's so much to cover that you don't think we could do it in one episode. With the amount of time that we've got left, around like 10 minutes or so, if there's like one or two things that you just absolutely wanted to talk about, I want to know what those are.
Absolutely.
Unless we've already covered that.
I mean, we've kind of covered the main stuff. I really do think, and I want to emphasize this again, is pull heavily from the different fairy tales that you knew growing up. Go grab one of Aesop's Fables books and read a couple of them, and just find ways that you can twist them just a little bit, so people can tell, okay, this is a fairy tale, but this is also twisted and dark, and there's something underneath the surface here. Because for the Fae, these stories, quote unquote, obviously Aesop doesn't exist in your world, but these fairy tales aren't fairy tales. It's their lives, right? This is what they do. They go around and mess with people and fuck with people, and that's how they find their fun.
Well, you know what could be a really cool Fae crossing that I just kind of thought of, and maybe it's reminiscent of isekai genre from anime where people come from a different world. But if you want to go literal and like transplant the Brothers Grimm fairy tales into a book form in your world, and they can flip through pages, and if they read a certain fairy tale for a certain amount of time, or say a certain word in one of them, that's where they're transported to in the Feywild.
Or it comes to life.
Like, how cool could that be?
You can
like
give them a book
form Fae crossing.
Ooh, another cool idea is, let's say you get a party member that loves books, and they're in the library, they find a fairy tale book like what Braxton's talking about, and they read about all these cool, obviously this would mean that DM that's the prep in advance, but they read about all these cool fairy tales, these funny little things that transpire, and then down the line, they somehow get transferred to the Feywild, and these stories that they read about 20 sessions ago are now right in front of their faces. The exact stories are taking place.
That would be super, super cool. And that's always something that has been blowing me out of the water for One Piece, is on episode 320-something that I was just watching, there's a callback or a call forward, I guess, for the arc that they're on right now on like episode 900. And it's like, how do you think of all of these things so far in advance? And
I mean, as a DM, that's one of the most rewarding feelings is watching the payoff finally pay off. Like the last session we had, there were little nuggets of information that have been going from the beginning of the campaign, and I got to watch it. You guys were like, oh, it all makes sense now.
Yeah, it took a while, man. I finally did it.
It's super cool, and I think Feywild, any of these planes are a great way to kind of start getting out of the material plane box.
Well, a really popular way to have your world right now, at least if it's high magic or if it's low magic and there's pockets of high magic, is for the planes to start leaking into each other and more of these crossings to start opening up. So definitely, if you're thinking about doing something like that, start for sure with the closer to home locations on the plains of the Feywild and the Shadowfell. Those are super, super great places to go with. Again, it's easy to handle because they're mirror images.
And there are, like I said, we're not covering them on the episode, but there are actual like cities, big cities that are commonplace in these worlds in the Feywild that you could definitely say exists right across this. Maybe it's right after, right out of the capital city in your material plane world, and there's this other big capital on the other side of the crossing. They hang out, they cross over often, or you could go even crazy with it and just do what I did and have all the planes converge in one location. And
I mean, if you listen to the Adventure Zone, the Amnesty part of it, it's very similar to having a Fae crossing there, like avoiding spoilers. But there are two worlds in that arc of the Adventure Zone after they leave the balance arc. So that could be great inspiration too. It's less mechanic. They're using Monster of the Week for that. But it's another great way to have that sort of accompaniment with one city or town and followed by like a connecting town as well. And they have to figure out to thrive together and how that works.
Yeah.
So that's a really cool idea, Ryan. I like that a lot.
If you love crazy shit, Feywild's your cup of tea, man. This is your spot.
Mm-hmm. Especially if you got players that are like, fairy's lame. Sure.
Show them
the insanity.
Power.
Make them go crazy. That would make me wonder too, how, like in my case, if I'm a warlock or a cleric that's patron is pretty far removed from the Feywild, would they be able to communicate with me there?
Maybe. I mean, if you go to other planes, they can still communicate, especially if it's something as powerful to be able to give someone these boons, these powers. It would definitely be able to communicate with someone over planes, but there are certain areas in the worlds and in the planes that prevent this communication. You could even say in an archfey's castle that nothing can escape you. You can't even plane shift in or out of it. It's Hogwarts, man. You can't get in and out of this place unless you walk through the main entrance, and they want you there.
Wait, that's how... I didn't know that was how Hogwarts works.
Yeah, you can't apparate into Hogwarts.
That's not... I guess that's good and bad. It's probably a pretty good prison.
Yeah, they don't want people just teleporting in, man.
They keep the school safe. Makes sense. You got powerful magic users everywhere. You got to protect it somehow.
He who must not be named in there.
Put Hogwarts in your Feywild. Done.
No. Don't put Hogwarts in your Feywild. Put Hogwarts in your material plane and have some crazy cool Fey school on the other side.
I wonder how many people do like Harry Potter D&D themed things. Probably a lot, yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
that would be super fun.
There's Lord of the Rings themed ones. I mean, there's even a Lord of the Rings. Lord of the Rings. There's a Lord of the Rings themed tabletop RPG game, which is really cool.
Makes sense. Those old Lord of the Ring PS2 or PS1 games were the shit.
Oh man,
been a long time since I played them, but I think they might still hold up.
Age is like a fine wine, dude.
Except for Kingdoms of Amalur Re-Reckoning, that did not hold up. But the world of that still does. Again, if you're looking for Feywild inspiration, do that for sure. But I think
I'll just read R.A. Salvatore's books, man. They're not great, but they're very they're just bread and butter D&D. It's not bread and butter fantasy world. There's nothing special going on, but it's good inspiration if you want to put stuff in your D&D world because it is D&D.
I always love how quick you are to give your opinion, just straightforward on things. It's okay.
I mean, it is. It's no Brandon Sanderson, if you know what I'm saying.
So, I mean, that leads me to think too, for sure. Like, if you are interested in asking Ryan his opinion on things, like this source book, this material, you know what you can do? You can jump on to like Twitter or Instagram if that's your shtick at Dungeon Crawl Pod, and you can message us something. You can tweet at us, say, "Hey Ryan, what the heck do you think about this?" And he goes, "That's ass.
Bullshit.
Read this instead." He will probably say it a little bit nicer, but it'll still be straightforward. Yeah. And if you want to send us a longer-winded message or something, you can message us at thedungeoncrawlpod@gmail.com for your email needs. But yeah, those are our social media things if you want to talk to us. We also have a Discord. You can figure that out in the description of this podcast here. Figure out your way there. We've had some friends, some chats. I've been posting way too many VTuber things, but it is sanctioned in the anime discussion, which is kind of controversial area there. So if you don't want to look at it, you don't have to.
Really controversial? How?
Well, I mean, that's not technically anime. I should make a VTuber channel.
True.
Nah, I want to keep it nice and neat. We already got a lot there. No one cares. I care. I care about all of you.
Really?
All right, Ryan, you got anything else you want to say?
I don't know. Any ideas for what we're doing next week, or anything that's pressing on your mind that you want to cover?
We already went into dungeon making. We could talk about making your world, but we've done that a bit already. I'm craving some more monsters, maybe?
Whoa.
We can do another monster. That sounds fun. Getting spicy. Either that or something that kind of helps people kickstart their brainstorming again, because I know everybody really enjoys the starting your campaign sort of episodes too.
Right.
So one of those two avenues would be fun. And if you just think those ideas are terrible and you really do not believe we should do either of those, the best way for us to see your feedback, I think Ryan wants to tell you about that.
Yeah. If you really hate what we do, like Braxton said, please. It really grinds my gears every time I log into my iTunes account and see a 5-star review. I'm like, are you fucking kidding me? Right? How dare you give us a 5-star review and then say something in the comment section like, this is the best podcast I've ever listened to?
It's terrible.
Are you serious? You would do something like that to me?
It's awful.
So if you really hate us, please believe that.
Just do it every time. Put those ninja stars on there. They will stab us in the back.
It really
as always,
really gets onto me.
As always and forever until the end of time, or at least until the end of our time. He's been Ryan.
And he's been Braxton.
This is the Dungeon Crawl. Thank you guys for learning about the Feywild this week. Don't jump down any rabbit holes, my friends.
Unless you want some fun.